where the curriculum falls short in that area, we do it. It's too important to neglect.
And I think the key is to part of that is getting new teachers to do that, and I have to admit that's not a strength of mine, and is thinking about how to bring in math books or science books for that matter, because science is completely not taught in some counties. And I looked to the reading teacher, which again is a journal by the International Reading Association, and they have done a really nice job over the past couple of years of putting in articles that will list math books for you that you could do a read aloud with if you were in first grade, second grade, or talking about some of the materials that are out there. And so that's what I use in my methods classes. I have them actually read in this particular journal about ways to integrate the content of it. And we might do a read aloud in my class and actually model what some of this might look like, because for many of them it's still a very discrete block of time for them, and they're not used, especially if their mentors aren't integrating, then they don't know what that looks like, and they don't think they're allowed to do it.
And also for our primary teachers, especially when we ordered books for their guided reading group time, we got a lot of, as noted, pushes nonfiction books, and it has the math concepts, and it has social studies and science text for those little first and second graders in their guided reading groups that we purchase for the teachers to use as well.
Well, let's talk, if you go up to high school then, I mean, I once was a high school math teacher for quite a few years, and they used to tell us that we had to teach reading, teach in math, and honestly, we rejected the idea.
They still do.
Well, I figured they did. I kind of suspected they did. But I wonder, though, in your different counties, though, do you have programs for your math teachers to help them with that notion of helping kids read in the math class, or reading? I mean, you have to read the math problems. Is there anything done with your high school math teachers? We have courses here, I know, for our pre-service teachers. I don't know how effective they are, but out in your professional development within your school systems, do secondary math teachers get any help with that, or are they still just left to say, okay, call the words? That's angle. What does that mean? You know, not really into how to teach reading at all.
I was going to say, I don't know about the secondary, but I know in our elementary curriculum, we do have that organizational text structure. There's a whole section of that in their objectives to teach how to teach, so they know how to read that textbook, whether you're in math class, because our middle school teachers were really like, okay, elementary teachers, help me out here, because when they get there, they don't know how to read these textbooks. So there's been a real push for us in elementary school to make sure that we're doing that organizational text structure, how to read those textbooks that they have. So I'm hoping that they continue that then, because we've done our job down there for them.
And there are a lot of publishers now who are making sure that their anthologies, that they have a lot of nonfiction content in the anthology. And just as I think of a lot of the magazines like Time for Kids or National Geographic, some of those things that you can purchase for classroom instruction that would have the science and social studies or math content, but it is used in the reading class. So that's another way of connecting the content.
But I think it does raise, it had his hand up before though.
Go ahead, Jerry's going to be long.
Okay. that reading and writing across disciplines, was a topic that came up every once in a while in the 80s and 90s, and it's done, and people know it would be important to do, but it's not really common practice. So what that raises in my thinking is maybe in terms of, I don't know if it will be new research, but considerations for teacher preparation that actually has courses designed for teaching science and mathematics with a language and writing base, so that it's not something that a teacher comes into their biology class or into their third grade class having to teach mathematics and figure out how to put those pieces together, but instead it has been an integral part of the teacher preparation. So that may be something to be considered, where there's a critical mass of persons that are in research and in teacher ed and teacher practice that really make it a focus that courses wouldn't really be provided for teachers that are preparing to teach, in urban settings or wherever, knowing that science and mathematics are going to become more and more accountable in terms of testing anyhow. And the fact that the reading and writing skills, as well as the higher level thinking skills, need to be not just incidental, or just thought about for gifted students, but this becomes, baseline practice. And so we may, it may be useful to really think in terms of that being, because we teach for reading, we teach for math, but what about teaching reading, science and mathematics, knowing that we have a language, arts, and writing base integral to the delivery of instruction in those areas.
I think in PG County, our curriculum framework does address that very well, because I don't know about the pre-kindergarten program because we just started that, so I'm not as familiar with that, but starting in kindergarten, we're writing in science and we're writing in math.
Got the journals and everything.
Yes,
That's
we're doing everything cross-curricular with that.
Right. So that's a foundation that's being laid, but in terms of general practice, it's not something that is spontaneously a part of people's background and prepared to teach. And so that may be something that we could, and see, those would be examples that could be pulled upon. But to make it more common practice, a deliberate effort may need to be made to make those courses, available as part of the mandated course provisions for persons that are going to teach.
Marilyn, I wanted you to say a little bit about your work, because I think it fits nicely with what we're talking about in terms of text structure and how to help kids read text, because Marilyn's done so much work in that area, and I think it's so important to, because I think teachers are lost a lot of times in teaching expository text, and maybe it's because they're not familiar with the structures themselves, really to dig deep and comprehend what's going on to be able to teach.
Yeah, I don't know quite how to get into that, but I have been very interested in reading and writing in the content areas, especially social studies and science, and very concerned about the kind of text materials. You were referring to nonfiction a little bit ago. I think in my work I talk about exposition rather than nonfiction because that's a structural issue. So kids know stories, they know stories, they know stories, but how in the world is a social studies text put together? Without some real instruction and help with that, it's only really the very sort of best, strongest readers who ever kind of intuitively figure that out. And so I've looked at what the texts look like. I've looked at different kinds of approaches to work with teachers so that they can learn how to identify the structure in a particular piece of writing. And then I have linked reading and writing together so that children, particularly 4th and 5th graders in social studies and science, would be reading a particular kind of text and figuring out how it's put together. And then they would be practicing writing the same kind of text. An explanation in science, for example, or an argument in social studies. And so at any rate, I have tried really hard to bring those pieces together. But there's one other part to this, and that is that over in EDCI, our Curriculum and Instruction Department, we have redesigned secondary reading so that it meets 2 times a week. In the first section, the students are all together from all the different content areas, and they are learning together some of the general principles about how teachers can support and be a bridge, so that students will learn from what it is that secondary teachers are assigning. And then the second time the class meets each week, they're meeting in lab groups. So they're meeting in the math lab, or they're meeting in the science lab, or I do the social studies one. We have one for English. We have one for electives, which is music and art and PE. And we're focusing that second time on the particular challenges in that content area, which those challenges are going to be very different from one content area to another. And this is the second semester we've done it. I'm very excited. Those labs especially are really powerful when the math kids in math are thinking through what are the special issues, literacy issues, in studying and learning mathematics from what we read. So anyhow.
So could we have a field trip to that area?